to another episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, your go-to source for the latest in industry trends and strategies to help you level up your M&A practice. I'm your host, Nick Olsen, Managing Director of Cornerstone International Alliance. We are a group of lower middle market M&A firms who work with business owners to help sell their companies. Here we bring in masterminds who are experienced, knowledgeable, and gracious enough to share their experiences and how they've succeeded in the world of M&A. And I'm excited, really, really excited about today's mastermind. She brings a powerful combination of psychological understanding, academic research, and hands-on business experience to her work. She commonly works with business owners, boards, advisors, family members, and management teams. Her dissertation on the psychology of owners at points of significant transition led to Orange Kiwi's revolutionary approach and validated psychometric assessment, the owner transition profile. Her unique collection of experience as a family business owner and advisor to successful owners, combined with rigorous academic research, allows Dr. Taylor to help clients achieve clarity, confidence, and control at points of significant transition. Today, she'll talk to us about increasing effectiveness with business owners from a psychological perspective. Please welcome me and please join me in welcoming Dr. Allie Taylor to the podcast. Allie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Nick.
Awesome. Well, and I want to start off by saying, you and I were connected through Scott Bushke, the founder of Cornerstone, and he saw you in a BEI event. And every year, as an alliance, we get together. I should say twice a year we get together in person. And Scott's like, we're talking about, who should we bring in as a keynote speaker? And he's like, I know a great speaker. I just saw her. That's amazing. We're going to bring her in. And fast forward to last week, we were in Scottsdale, Arizona, 30 of us in Scottsdale talking all things M&A. And you were gracious enough to join us as our keynote speaker to talk about a lot of relevant things that I think that we normally don't pay enough attention to, in my opinion. And that's just the psychological approach to how you're talking to business owners. That's our main clientele. And so I wanted to first and foremost tell you how amazing the 4 hours you spent with us were. I know I heard a lot of great feedback. Allie, this is the best. She's the best speaker I've heard. And a lot of times when you bring in a speaker, you want it to be practical and usable and whatnot. And I think everything that you talked about with us, is something we can put into practice immediately. And that's really what we want to dive into to today's discussion on, is a lot of those ways and how, we can effectively talk to business owners. And so again, thank you for joining us in Scottsdale. I really, really appreciate it.
It was a great group of people to work with. I really appreciated their engagement. The alliance and the way you've built the alliance, it's a really special dynamic group.
Yeah. I agree, and it's a group that we're all competitive, but in this group there's a lot of information and sharing and working together and collaboration, and that was the whole idea of this entire conference that we put on, and you talking about how we can not only collaborate with each other but also collaboration in a different form of making sure that we're talking to the business owner in the right way so that we can be effective in how we're communicating with them. And so let's start there, but I want to take a step back first. Tell us a little bit about your background. I know in the intro, it's a lot of amazing, the things that you've done in your career so far, but tell us a little bit about how you have became, combined psychology and business all into one profession.
Yeah, nobody grows up thinking they're going to be a business psychologist, I guess. So it really came out of failure, to be really honest. I had been in a family business. I didn't know it was a family business. And it was fantastic till it wasn't. And it destroyed my marriage, my family, and our successful business. So I'd never do that again. Got my degree in marriage and family therapy. Hated being in the little room with people on the way to divorce court. And I thought for sure this one couple, that's where they were headed. But they didn't. They stayed. They did really hard work for a bit over a year. And at the end, the husband was reaching for the door, and I thought, oh, this ended so well. I'm so happy. And he did the classic, and I'm like, oh no, here it comes. But he said, that thing that I used to do with my wife, I do that in spades with my management team, and it's only gotten worse. Can you come help? So I got to go back in and play with a management team, and I realized how much I love business. And what was even more interesting to me was in less than 6 months, we got deeper change in him than we could get with just what he and his wife could bring to the room.
Mm.
And so over time, I filed that experience away. I went to run operations for a nonprofit with 400 staff in 27 countries, doing everything from starting businesses to fund their work to leadership development among the poor and marginalized all over the world. And I met what I call my husband, friend, and business partner there. So I'd never get married again. I'd never go into family business. And lo and behold, that's exactly where I am. He's an ex-McKinsey and Company consultant. And we are working with clients in the low to mid market, running into the same challenges over and over. So he made me go back and get my PhD to figure out why. And that's where the pieces started to come together and the research came together. And it really is the change that people are looking for and seeking. It's really in the financials or the market environment or access to capital. It's almost always what's happening below the surface in their inner world.
Mm. And yeah, that's a lot of, like I said, what we discovered. And you talked to our group with when we were in person. But um, tell us a little bit more deeper. I know you mentioned, at the front end, but when you're working with, you're coming in and talking to a group like ours, and we're all M&A advisors, and we're working with, mostly sell side M&A transaction, business owners and things like that. And so, how you thought the conversation the day went, from starting to ending, and kind of, I thought I saw a couple of aha moments, but maybe you did too. But just how working with a group like ours, kind of transpires, and what you kind of expect those takeaways to be from that engagement.
That's a great question. So working with a group like yours, advisors come in all shapes and sizes. So when I spoke with BEI, the room was much more diverse, everything from estate and tax to just flat out exit advisors, right? So you have to be able to cross all the disciplines of their silo. I mean, all the silos of their disciplines, and figure out what is the need that they have. With you guys, the need's really clear. You get rewarded when money is in motion. You're not paid hourly. Sometimes you don't get paid, except for maybe the retainer fee. And so there's certain motivational forces that drive your behaviors. I really spent a lot of time before I got in the room thinking about what are those forces that are driving your behaviors and how are owners experiencing them. And so then what do you need to hear about yourself and about owners to be able to have those aha moments? I think the big takeaway or our through line for the day was, if you remember, I had everybody repeat after me. It's not about me. It's
Yep.
about the owner. What do I have to do to get out of my way? Right. And I think that is the biggest takeaway of all is, as advisors, we often think it's about us and we have these goals and we need to achieve these goals. And if that's what we focus on, we're going to miss the mark more often than not.
Yeah. And why do you think, I guess, why is that? And why do you think it's a challenge for M&A advisors?
Human behavior. We seek rewards, and we have to put food on the table for our families, right? So we need to be compensated. We need to be successful in our goals. And as we noticed in the room, we had a lot of D's, or what we call lions. We had a lot of competitive, driven personality styles. And so they're always thinking about, how do I win? How do I succeed? What's next? And goal achievement is a very, very high need for them. When we're wired that way, it's really hard to set ourselves on the shelf and do perspective taking through other lenses to figure out how to work differently with people, both owners and our colleagues.
Mm-hmm. No, and you've worked with many different disciplines within business, but from an M&A perspective, were you surprised to see that many lions in the room?
Not at all. Investment bankers, there's a lot. If I'm talking to CPAs or valuation advisors, I'm going to find a lot of C's, right? A lot of beavers, detailed, methodical.
Yep.
Favorite questions how. But No, in the M&A world, you eat what you kill. So there is going to be definitely lions.
Yeah. And so, and a lot of those advisors, at least the ones in our room, were the owners of their firms too. And you talk about
Yes.
the owners, but you also talk about your colleagues. What advice can you give M&A, firm owners who are that lion? How can they better work with and communicate with their own staff?
Oh gosh. Um,
Throw a curveball at you there.
that's a that's okay. I don't mind a few curveballs. Swing and a miss, as long as you don't mind me reframing the question a little bit.
Sure,
I
absolutely.
I think what you're asking is how can we be more effective with those that we lead?
Yes, that's
If
a better way to put it.
Okay, awesome. If that's the case, I will go back to what the research tells us. And what the research tells us is that emotional intelligence is the highest skill that correlates with success when it comes to leadership. Being an emotionally intelligent leader is the most important thing. And so, what does that look like? Emotional intelligence has three parts: self awareness, other or social awareness. Both terms are used for that one. And then the ability to self regulate. And self regulating, we don't regulate our emotions, we regulate the meaning we make of our emotions or our feelings. So that is the tough part, right? Because we're constantly getting triggered. Emotions, a biological and biochemical response to a trigger or a stimulus. And there's this little tiny space between that stimulus that and the emotion it creates to our making meaning of it and acting on that meaning. It's getting really good at using that space to our competitive advantage and knowing what's happening below the surface in our inner world and how it impacts others.
And yeah, and I know we talked about that too, and that also goes with the communication that space when you're talking to a business owner too. So not only from your own staff or the people you're leading, but essentially you're leading this business owner, through this as you call it, a time of transition. And so what should we understand too from the business owner perspective? Because I know you say at a significant time of transition. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously, we're working with business owners at that time, which are, high emotional, high stakes. Why is that so important to know that we're working with them at this significant transition time, and how does that change? Or how should we be more focused on that component to this life-changing event for them?
Yeah, for you it's a transaction and then you'll go on to the next transaction, right? For them, it's a transaction that's going to reshape their identity, who they spend time with, where they get their significance needs met, where they get their need for competency met, where they get their need for relatedness met, where they get to live out the personality attributes that made them successful in the first place. They're still going to have all those same psychological needs, and the one place where the majority of those needs get met, their business is no longer available to them. If we don't, as advisors, pay attention to that early in the journey and be really good at asking exploratory questions, they're going to have surprises as they go through the process, and their surprises will become your problems or challenges. So you don't want to get to the deal table and find out that, 90 days earlier, while you're putting together the sim, if you just asked a few good questions, you might have sparked some thought, or you might have realized this owner is not quite ready to sign that deal. It's much better to find out then than at the signing table when all of a sudden they tell you there's this business reason or it's not enough money.
Yeah. And and so how would you advise the advisor to better, ask better questions, be more mindful on the front end, kind of dig a little deeper. And I know we got into that too. And I guess it doesn't, correct me if I'm wrong, it starts with understanding your own, personality and how you think about things, and quickly understanding the, the, the communication behavior, I guess, for that's not the right term, but on
It's
how
okay.
the business owner is and how you can ask the right questions, right?
Yeah, I think you said it fine, and it's a perfectly good term, a behavior or a communication style. You can use them interchangeably. Um, you're right. It starts with self-awareness. How do I naturally communicate? What are my needs in this process? And then how is that owner going to experience me? You might even say, how do I want that owner to experience me? And are those two things aligned? Most often when I'm working with advisors, they think the owner is experiencing them in one way. We'll call it style A. The reality is the owners experience them completely different than they expect because they think they understand what the owner wants and needs them to be. They think the owner wants and needs them to be a quarterback and to lead them through the process. But that's not what they want. The image that comes to my mind is an owner with a ring in their nose and the advisors all trying to grab the ring and be the one that leads them, right? If you can stop and hold that visual, nobody in their right mind wants that, right?
No.
And you're an owner of your own business. You don't want anybody to lead you by the nose, but somebody who comes alongside, puts their arm through your arm and can help facilitate the process, help you see, see that 3 steps ahead, we're going to stumble over that if we don't do these things now. That's what the experience they're looking for. So what would it take, just reflecting on my style, or we'll use you, Nick, reflecting on your own style, reflecting on how you typically work with clients. What specific behaviors would you have to change? What mindsets would you have to change to have the owner experience your arm through their arm versus being led by the nose ring through a process? And I'm not asking you to do that right now, but I would encourage you, stop and mind map it. And then call up a couple of owners that you used to work with a long time ago and just ask them how they experienced you. And if you've got a great relationship, they might be vulnerable. Specifically, if you frame the question like this: I know that I served you well, but I think I could have served you better. What could I have done to make you, and then fill in the blank, feel more confident, have less stress, whatever you wanted to know there. And don't defend, don't argue, just thank them. And the more you affirm and thank, the deeper they'll go. When you get 3 layers down, that's probably the thing that would have made the biggest difference for them.
Yeah, that's a great exercise to go through. I bet that because when you're talking with a past, and over time, you probably develop a deeper relationship, just generally speaking, with these business owners. You spend so much time together, right? So you might, start off as a, advisor and client, and maybe, morph into a deeper conversation or a deeper relationship, I should say. But to go back and because it's, I'm just thinking out loud, like typically you'll go back and be like, hey, can you give me a testimonial? Can you do this and that? But I think,
Yes.
which is great, but I think the more beneficial thing to do is actually do what you just said, is help learn from how they experience this, and instead of thinking like, oh, I did a great job, I got them 10x, got above the asking price, and this was amazing and great, but there might be some things that you don't know about that you want to learn from, and I think that's a great way to go about doing it.
Yeah, because what you just said is that enterprise value being 10x was the highest value you could bring to that owner. But I bet if you went and asked those owners, it wasn't the money. It's
Right.
very rarely the money.
Right. I mean, the money's great, don't get us wrong.
Money's great because they do compete, right? They do want to see the number, but it's not the most important thing.
But I mean, and maybe flip this onto the owner too, because I think understanding the owner's perspective as well as, they've spent how many years in the business, 10, 20, 30 plus years, could be a family business, generations after generation. And, for them to actually go and sell that their baby, their, probably their biggest financial transaction of their lives is going to be, and it symbolizes like what's to come too down the road. Like you said, you put all these psychological needs that you have into the business, you got to put them elsewhere, but also, now it's okay, what's next? And something you're not necessarily used to or comfortable with, and not that this is relatable, but a funny, I coach my son's basketball team for the past 6 months. We had our last tournament this weekend, and we practice 3 days a week, and we'd have practice tonight. I'm like, what am I going to do tonight?
Yes. That's a great example of a significant transition, right?
Yeah.
You behaved a certain way. Your calendar looked a certain way. You ordered your life a certain way. And now what? Now magnify that a millionfold, and you might
Right.
get the experience of what an owner goes through.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So what could you say from your work from the owner's perspective that would help us as advisors know kind of what they're doing? I mean, I know every owner is different, every situation's unique, but some tips or that you could let us know on the other side of the table, not the other side, but working with them, but to understand their perspective that would help us better serve them along the process.
So one of the reasons I built the owner transition profile, it's built on my dissertation research and some additional research, is because I have a passion for disrupting the current advisory ecosystem that exists around owners. Not because those advisors are awful advisors. They're great. Most often they're great advisors wanting to do a really good job, but they don't yet speak owner fluently, right? And every owner is different. So being able to look below the surface and be able to meet the owner's needs, everything from the team that you're going to put around the owner, making sure there's a good fit for that owner's style, and being able to see the owners who, they're going to need you to spin a few plates for a while before they're really going to move forward, or they're not going to move forward at all. Their identity is so fused to their role, and their approach to change is so incremental and adaptive or even resistant that you're better off just building relationship, being the ambulance at the bottom of the hill, and making really slow incremental progress than thinking you're going to push them to action. No matter which of those, or even the person that's identity is not fused to their role and they're very open to change. They've got a great management team. The business isn't dependent on them. They can move to transaction tomorrow and not take a whole bunch of haircuts and diligence, right? They've buttoned everything up. Knowing what those people need, because they'll still have needs as you go through the transaction, allows you to build rapport faster and allows you to put your own needs on the shelf, see it a little bit more objectively, and conceptualize your process in a new way to meet the owners where they're at instead of trying to get them to meet you where you're at.
What are some, to understand the owner more, what are some common questions or things that you would ask or recommend advisors ask early on to develop that?
Yeah, that's really good. The first thing I do is build, and we did this exercise in the room, right? We took a first pass at it. Is I'd understand the 4 basic communication styles. Recognizing people are not all one thing, but look at the 4 basic communication styles: competitive, spontaneous, amiable, and methodical. Look at those, and then build a set of questions for each one that help build confidence. So if I'm talking to somebody who's in that amiable golden retriever S quadrant, I'm going to ask deep one-to-one relational questions once I have permission to do so. So I'm going to make sure they feel really safe and comfortable with me and who I am. And by letting them get to know me, it gives them I earn the right to be heard and permission to ask them questions. Then I get to understand what would be most meaningful for you to be able to say to your employees after the transaction. Right now, they know that I really know what matters to them, and I can help them think about the future. And if they answer that with a story about a particular person, I know I'm in the right quadrant, and I can then tailor a lot of my approach to them. If I'm in a more competitive quadrant, I'm not just going to ask, what's your magic number? Like, what number do you need to get out of this business? But I might say something like, what would make this engagement a win? Let's assume you got your target enterprise value 5 times over. We got 5x what you really want. Put the money on the shelf. What would really make this a win for you? And that forces them to think and reflect. They're going to be very fast and slow down. You've got them if you can stump them and they take a beat before they answer.
Yeah.
The other thing you might learn if they don't take a beat is that they've been thinking about this for a long time, and this is the highest and best thing. Right? Those are kind of the opposites on the spectrum. If I'm going to ask a I or an otter, that spontaneous one, I'm going to ask them about who should be on your team as you go through this process. Who do you want to do this with? Who's not sitting here at the table right now that you're going to be talking to, right? They care about getting things done, but they want to get it done through people and they want to have fun. I'm never going to rush an otter to task because they need relationship first in a really spontaneous and fun way. And then that more methodical how person, our beaver, I'm going to make sure that I have a very detailed how for them, time bound. Here's our project plan. Here's our steps, but I'm not going to impose it on them. I would say something like, here's our typical process. How would you improve on that? And if they start to go the how and the detail, I know I'm talking to a beaver and I need to let them have a little bit more control in how our process looks. And they'll take ownership if they can design it a little bit. And I just have to learn that if I'm there, I need to surrender some control. Mm-hmm. By learning how to work with different personality styles, you build your emotional intelligence, but you also build rapport much faster.
So to pivot, add on to that, what are some questions, to help us understand what style we're working with in these business owners that we're trying to, figure out how to best communicate with?
So I'm going to pivot that back to you because your team did a really good job coming up with some questions for the different styles. Do you want to give it a go?
Yes, and I thought as we filled out this graph, and it's vivid in my head, there's 4 quadrants and there's a box in the middle. And one of the questions was, what would be a win for you in this conversation? That was the first one, right? And which is a somewhat generic question. And then the other one, which I thought was interesting, that I think a couple of people in the room brought up, was, what keeps you up at night?
Correct. Yeah. And with those generic questions, it was really important then to make sure you had a follow-up question for each of the 4 quadrants.
Mm-hmm. For, I guess, I'll give it a whirl. For an otter, your follow-up question might be, who do you rely on in your business?
Perfect.
Right. The golden retriever would be, just tell me more, right? Just.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the lion is one of the questions I thought was interesting was, how is business going?
And do you remember that one? How's business going? We're trying to activate their competitiveness, and we can start to then drill down a couple layers to build the rapport. So they really feel like we care.
Right. And then one of the ones for the beaver was, what additional information would be helpful for you at this stage? Being the methodical.
Yes. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And so sharing this with all of our group for them to just go back and look at, even I can visualize in my head too. It would just be a great tool for them to have now that, when they're and this is a lot of times in your experience would be when you're pitching a client. Is that more important when you're pitching a client to understand the stuff before, or is it like after an assigned engagement that now you're starting to work with them?
No, way before. So, even in some of those opening conversations, and you might want to take this exercise a step farther, right? So figure out the questions for the different phases. But in those early conversations, when you're having the exploratory, it's the rapport building phase, being able to speak their language helps them feel psychologically safe, like you care, and allows them to communicate in a way that works for them, so they're more likely to go deeper faster. Mm-hmm. That's really the key behind that exercise, why we do it. Yep. Later on, so here's the risk. If you do a bait and switch, if you start out meeting them where they're at, and then somewhere along the line you flip a switch and you start just acting out of your own nature without giving consideration for what they need, that does not go well. Yeah, so once you do this, you have to commit. Yeah, it does. Because you get tired and you're working and your own style is natural. It comes easy. You have to put effort in to reach across and be a different style. work with a
What
different style.
what would be your recommendation or tip on how to persevere through that? And like, is there any
Hmm.
exercise or any thoughts that we could do, like, oh, this is just not working for me or whatever? Like how we can bring that awareness to, like, okay, it's not about me. I got to get out of my own way. It's about the business owner, right?
Yes, 100%. It's not about you, it's about the owner. How do you get out of your way? And so just little simple exercises. First, knowing where you're at. Are you feeling tired? Are you exhausted? Do you not sleep well? Is your blood sugar low? Whatever you can fix in you before you engage. But let's say you get into the conversation, just subtle things like calming your brain, taking some slow, deep breaths, pausing before you respond, reminding yourself what you want out of the conversation, why it's important for meeting the owner where they're at. Those just little subtle, three little things. Nobody has to know you're doing it. Just three little things you can do to help your mind rest enough or sell enough or refocus enough to be able to push through. And the other thing, give yourself permission to get up, go to the bathroom, get a cup of coffee, a drink of water, whatever you need to be able to just give yourself space to come back and be peacefully present despite whatever stress is going on.
We did an exercise. We closed our eyes, took a bunch of deep breaths, and thought about something else other than focus on a part of your body that maybe is, doesn't feel right or hurts or whatever. And I had a couple of those areas, but so how can we take, because taking a bunch of deep breaths in front of your client might not always be practical, but
Yeah.
what was the purpose of that exercise, and how does that translate into an actual, in the room conversation with you, and where you need to take a beat?
Yeah. So that exercise had a couple of purposes. One, to show you that you do have control. You can change your mindset. You can change your experience in that moment. Two, you can't control your environment, but your external environment, but you can control your inner world. So no matter what's going on around you, you've got this space that you can retreat to, and paying attention to what's happening in your body helps you know where to focus, where to focus energy, time. They can be really powerful cues for you. So if we were going to spend enough time for you to track it and practice it, you'd start to see patterns. So for me, when I'm working with a client that I struggle with, it's a harder personality style for me. I carry my tension in my jaw, and I find that I smile too much. And I'm smiling, but I'm clenching my jaw at the same time. And when you pause and when you're in that moment and you can just do a quick body scan, and your brain is capable of more than one thing at a time, you can be listening and taking notes and then just noticing, like, what am I feeling at the moment? What are the thoughts going through my mind? What are the physical sensations? If you can start to do that exercise over time, you'll know what things are triggering it and what cues, and it'll be able to put your mind goes, oh, I know what this is. Because I know what this is, I know how to move through it. So for me, when I'm feeling that, I refocus on my why. I am here to serve this client to get them over this hurdle. It's not about me. What do they need right now? Right. And so I put it where it is. And the other thing is, sometimes it's this, what is my win in this engagement? I'm spend so much time trying to help clients meet their goal achievement. Sometimes I need to define what's my win. And if I can hold on to that, I have my why, it's enough resilience to get through. But it starts by paying attention to what's happening inside.
Now you say it, the clenched jaw thing. I feel like for me, it's like this, and then it's the
Ready to
neck.
attack. Yeah.
Yes, it's like my neck. I feel like my neck getting sore, and it's like this clenching of my, like that with my shoulders, and just take a deep breath, roll the shoulders back, relax, and that, I think that's exactly why I always have this neck pain, because you get in those situations, you're
Yes.
clenching, you're
Yes.
clenching.
It's an ancient mechanism. Like so much human behavior is tied to how we survived on the savannah, right? When tribes warring against each other. This, when you hunch your shoulders up and tighten your muscles, you're readying yourself for battle. It's an offensive body
Yeah.
posture, right? And guess what? Your client experiences it. They have mirror neurons. the more defensive you get, the more those physical signs are starting to come out, the more heightened they're going to get. The more relaxed you get in those moments, the more you just let your shoulders relax, breathe a little bit easier, talk with a little bit slower pace, make sure they feel heard. Like there's a shift in the energy in the room.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the other thing I do is I pick up the pace of my voice.
Yes.
That's also a good, very, very good tip and very relevant for me.
And all you're doing right now is you're getting these insights. You're thinking back to an exercise you did, and you're now applying it to yourself. So it's hard when you first do it because you feel like something's going to happen to you or you might be made a fool of. Like lots of different things can go through our head in those moments. Please don't let her pick on me. But now that you have a little bit of space, you know how it comes out, you have control, your brain is able to respond differently.
Yeah. Not only was this a great discussion, it actually taught me a couple of things again. So, Allie, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I learned even more than I did last week in the 4 hours that we were together. But just to kind of recap the discussion, some high level takeaways for our listeners today. What are some things that we should all consider when getting in a room with a business owner and how we can best serve them for their needs and that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Our through line, right? It's not about me, it's about the owner. How do I get out of my way? And then as you're going into the room, before you go in, know the outcome you want from the conversation and why it matters. So most often the outcome you want is a successful engagement. In order to get that success, and it matters because that's how you get paid, right? So there's your how and your why. And then really pausing to think about what you're willing to give up, which is usually control, but not always. What you're willing to give up in that conversation to be able to get that ultimate win. And what it really requires is knowing yourself, knowing what the owner wants and needs, and knowing how to regulate your own emotion, your own feelings in the midst of that conversation.
And if someone wanted to work with you and understand, your own style and your own communication style and how that can correlate, because everyone's different, but a lion, is different than an otter, than is a golden. Like we'll have to understand probably first and foremost, maybe I'm wrong, but our own style, and then how to identify the style of the people we're working with, and then kind of mapping that to make sure that the two correlate with each other. So I'd imagine you do that a ton with all your clients. And so if our listeners want to learn more, or where they can go to, work with you or learn more from you or bring you in to speak at their event or do a workshop, maybe longer term, where can we send our listeners to go to get more information about working with you?
Sure. Our website, orangekiwillc.com, or you can reach out to my colleague Michelle, Michelle, at OCKIWI.com, and she's happy to provide any of our resources to you.
I meant to ask, and I think I've asked you before, but where did the name of your company come from?
I was born and raised in Orange County, California, and my husband Frentner is from New Zealand. He's the Kiwi.
Orange Kiwi. There you go.
Yep, there you go.
I love it. I love it. Well, Allie, thanks again for joining us here on the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Thank you for spending an afternoon with us in Scottsdale, our in-person conference, and I know our listeners will be better for this conversation that you and I had. I even learned a lot about myself here in the 30, 40 minutes that we've talked, above and beyond the 4 hours we spent last week. So thank you again for your willingness to talk with us today. And that's it for this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Do Allie and myself a favor, like, share, and comment this episode. Pass it on to anybody who you think would benefit from this conversation, whether you're an M&A advisor or just someone who's looking to grow relationships and communicate in a better way overall. I think this would be a great conversation to listen to. You can check out all of our episodes at cornerstoneia.com/podcast. And hopefully you had a couple of takeaways from our discussion today. Thank you again, Allie. Until next time, everyone, take care.